very honored and I'm very privileged this evening to have an esteemed group of speakers who I will introduce in just a moment, literally from around North America, who have come here tonight on varying shoestring budgets, on favors, on the belief that the Green Party is the right way of doing business, and we wanted to be here. If you look at the history of Canada and you look at what we have done as a country and what we've done in terms of our Constitution, even as far back as Leech Lake, sometimes the most historic, most talked about moments take place in the back rooms of the kitchens, if you will, of the Chateau Lauriers. And here we are at Royal Roads University, and what I think will be a very historic moment for the Green Party, because we have said we want to work with great businesses and we want to acknowledge them, and they want to work with us. And if you can imagine what might happen this evening with this group of people, if we work together and we do it responsibly, and we do it ethically, and we do it with courage, what that could signal for the transformation of the policy and the types of business systems we want to give to British Columbians, I really think it could happen right here. So a round of applause for everyone who thought, I want to be at this dinner tonight. This was worth my $65, I believe. Today, and I know some of you said, and I'll try not to repeat myself, but I'm such a fan of this guy. He went out on a limb, and at a time when we needed someone to be a bit of a hero for the Greens and to put his own political agenda aside and speak on our behalf at the UBCM, Mayor Melamed did not hesitate to do it. And as I acknowledged earlier, Vancouver's own Mayor, Sam Sullivan, was so pleased to raise the motion, but to get someone like Ken to do it was a real big step for us because, of course, he is a Green and he is a respected Green. And we talked a bit about today about the challenges that he faces, of course, of having the Olympics and trying to make them a Green Olympics. When you spend a bit of time with Ken, you get to know a couple things, and I've just even learned them this evening, and I'm excited to share only hints of them, and maybe he'll tell you the full story, and maybe he won't. But this is a man who has skied down Whistler Mountain with Dave Murray. This is a man who has 2 children, and he's been married to the same lovely gal for, I hope I'm getting it right, over 25 years, sir. This is a man who didn't necessarily aspire to politics, but he felt the call of public service. And at one point in his life, as close as I am to this microphone, he has been face to face with a Whistler bear. Literally. I won't tell the story, it's not as fun when I tell it, it's better when you tell it. But he's a really interesting guy. He stood up and he seconded a motion that helped move us into a place where I know we can go forward. I know the next leader is going to want to work with him or ask for his counsel on how to take it that much further, how to actually get it done. You have a big, big job ahead of you because you have to weigh the pressure of Greens around British Columbia and in your own municipality on top of your own beliefs and your own ethics, but we've heard you, and my wife and I have gotten to know you over the weeks and months, and we've fallen in love with the way that you see Whistler as this magical place that our own family has a history in, and we're so honored that you would take the time and you would give up a 5-course meal at an annual Whistler celebration tonight to be here with us. He did. He gave up 5 courses at a hotel to be with us tonight, and he does it every year. But what makes him such a unique guy, I hope I'm not fawning too much, everyone's going to get a crush on him. I heart Ken Melamed. Is that we asked if he would come to I heart Ken Melamed. I just carved it into the podium right here. He took When we asked if he would do this, and we asked if he would come tonight and he would speak about all these different things, he said, I would really like to do it, I would love to do it. I have to get back to you because I have a long-standing engagement that I always do in Whistler. And this is the mayor of Whistler, and he has responsibility, and he has a council, and he has friends, and he's got to get reelected. And when it came down to it, he said, I will be there. And you were there when we needed you at UBCM. Please don't cry. I said I wasn't going to cry. Hold it together, Bennett. I'm so close. I'm so close. and he said that he would do that. But no, seriously though, he didn't hesitate to do it. The man never hesitates to do these things for Green. All I can hope is that when it's time for re-election, if there's anything I can do to convince you to run for this party, I can speak for every one of the leadership candidates when I say you will absolutely be welcomed and we would be honored to have you as a candidate. Ladies and gentlemen, Whistler's Mayor, Ken Melamed.
Yeah.
Tremendous value to this evening, and obviously encourage and added humor and life and spirit to the party and to a movement that needs that. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Ken, is that a Ken hard Ian?
So I've got a lot to say, so I'm gonna blaze into this, because Christopher said I had a half an hour. I asked him for 40 minutes. I can go on for 4 hours, but there are some things that I want to share because I care so much and so deeply about this movement. First, let me just dispense with the thanks for giving me the honor to be here. It is great to be here among friends, because this is how I got into politics. It was through environmental activism. I helped found AWARE, the environmental group in Whistler, which helped to turn the resort from a complete development mindset to one to embrace the natural environment and see beyond just simply money and building stuff. It's been a fantastic ride that I've been on. I've been in Whistler for, this is my 33rd winter. I had no idea when I moved to Whistler that I would end up being the mayor, of course, and least of which to be the mayor of the host of the 21st Olympic and Paralympic Games. So it's been a fantastic ride. I've got a lot of skiing in. I've kind of gotten that out of my system, even though I continue to ski patrol 1 day a week on Fridays. But I was a professional ski patroller for 28 years, and a professional skier, I would call myself, for over 30 years. And it's great to be able to represent Whistler. I'm the luckiest mayor in Canada, no question about it. And what has been all the more rewarding is to be able to represent a town that espouses the values that I do, and to be able to represent that internationally. So I was going to speak about the motion UBCM. You kind of know about that. That was easy to do because it just followed principles and supported, as I said, friends. And I'm all about trying to increase the level of debate and advance the cause of Greens. I want to take a second to acknowledge the work that you do, because one of the things that is most lonely about being in politics is that everybody thinks you're crazy. Like, what the heck? What are you doing there? Why would you do that? I could never do that. And of course it takes a certain skill set. It takes a certain person to be able to do that, but it also takes a party and people like yourselves and the support network to support the people who are willing to stand. It is a lot of hard work, but it is, of course, the most important work. It is the most important work. In the absence of that, the people who are passing laws and making decisions on your behalf that change and shape our lives are not the people you want to be there. And are not visionary. So I thank each and every one of you. I thank the candidates for standing. And I sincerely hope that your spirits are going to continue to find the hope and the energy that we need to carry on. The role of the Green Party in British Columbia is never more critical, because what we have seen is the traditional parties who have a history of failure and non-achievement, trying to step into this ground that you have created, that we have created. And so the time is not to step back and say, oh, well, it's great, Gordon Campbell's talking about the environment. We don't have to do that anymore. I don't think he gets it. I don't think his cabinet is sincere. Actually, I think Gordon gets it better than his cabinet. And the cabinet is actually looking at each other going, what did he say? What did he just ask us to do? And it's pretty incredible to watch their expression. But the fact is that climate change is not environment. Climate change is not sustainability. Gordon gets climate change, but I don't think he's quite got the rest. And it's not only energy efficiency. I'm going to repeat that message over and over. It was part of my growing up into understanding a bigger context for what started out as environmental activism. And I thought business was the enemy, to understanding a whole new context, whole new language around how to deal with the problems that are in front of us. The sustainability challenge, to the role of the Green Party, the challenge is immense. It's not something that's going to be solved in 1 or 2 years. And the fact is, the more you think about why and how we got here, the more you have to agree that mankind is not predisposed to being friendly or caring for where he lives. We have actually a pretty good history of being very selfish, over-consuming, and there are civilization and cultural historical incidents of civilizations being responsible for their own self-collapse. So, when you ask, is the Green Party relevant, is it necessary? It's going to be necessary and ever more necessary and relevant because the challenges and the conversations are going to be that much more difficult. So we need a force, a voice that is very clear on how to define success, and it's about a shared language of the future. I want to thank Christopher again for inviting me. The reason I'm here is because Whistler is not just the #1 ski resort in North America, but it's also become a world leader recognized in sustainability. And in all modesty, I had a role in doing that. For many years, I was the ostracized voice on council. I started in the environmental movement about 20 years ago. There was an ad in the paper. Anybody interested in getting recycling started in Whistler, please come to a meeting at the Crystal Lodge.
I can't even remember. I just remember that because I read the internet.
Yeah, my wife and I were starting to have a family, and we were starting to think about other things than skiing and double dirty mothers. So I showed up to the meeting, and I thought I'd get involved in the committee, and recycling sounded like a good thing. We didn't have that in Whistler. And so, I went from being an avid ski bum to a person concerned about 3 R's, and we got recycling going in Whistler, to someone who learned about wetlands and the need to advocate for habitat, to land use and showing up at council meetings and public hearings on rezonings, to running for council, getting a seat at the table, becoming tagged as the conscience of the community, and many other things less complimentary. To then actually having the role as sort of the pseudo-minister of environment for Whistler. And the administrator and the mayor would come to me and ask for approval. To becoming elected the mayor, and now a sustainability advocate and activist. And it was a personal evolution and an evolution of this understanding that, you start by asking, I mentioned this earlier today, you have to ask yourself why we haven't been successful if we've been at this since 1970. And, I thought it was about doing stuff like recycling and reducing air pollution until a day came in Whistler when we began on a long-term sustainability plan, comprehensive sustainability plan, where we heard about a new language and a new way of defining sustainability, which incorporated the environment and actually placed it at the bottom or the base or the core, the fundamental principle around which everything else is organized, and yet within which nests our society, our social structure, and then within that nests an economic need for people to meet their needs, an economic methodology, so the economy. So it was a role change for me. I had to move from being activist to counselor to being a mayor who was no longer marginalized or actually being critical. My nickname was Dr. No in Whistler, and actually during the campaign, that's what the opposition used. Why would you elect Dr. No? He just says no to everything. And I had to say to the people, I said no to the Olympics, and the Olympics have decided it's coming here. I'm going to be a champion for them. We're going to make them the best we can do. And I'm going to take a broader perspective. And keep in mind, some of the things, I'm going to move to a place now which is a little bit, maybe hard for some people to hear, but I want you to try and open your minds, because it's, in the same way that your parents told you that peas were good for you, and you didn't get it until you got older. There's something that happened in Whistler that is the reason for my being mayor. I would not be mayor if it hadn't been for the natural step. Pure and simple. There's just no, I don't see it any other way. And this is part of that new language I was talking about. This is something that happened to me, happened to Whistler, as we engaged in our future. So what happened, in a nutshell, Whistler was in this tremendous growth phase. It became a world-class ski area. It hit 2.3 million skiers a year. No one else in North America has ever done that, and only one European ski area has ever had that many skier visits in a year. It became, I don't know why I need to add this, but I do anyway. It's 10% of the tourism economy of BC. It's $1 billion a year. $1 million a day in federal and provincial taxes come out of Whistler. That just gives you a sense of how successful it's been. And that's because there's some really bright people that have come there for a lot of variety of reasons, but they focused on making it and turning it into a resort. And they did that largely by studying other resorts, learning from other people's mistakes. So a lot of good and serious planning went into that. It's not accidental. And so Whistler's success was based on a lot of factors, among them being new, the new kid on the block. Everybody had to try it out, and there was this phenomenal amount of growth that happened every year. It was pumping money into the economy, and the municipal government rose. We were able to build an $11 million arena and pool with cash, with money raised from the development of Whistler Village. We raised $6 million from the development of the village for an employee housing fund, which we leveraged to $30 million and built several hundred units of employee housing. But phenomenal amount of wealth and growth. But that was coming to an end. Many people, few people know that in 1989, we had a very controversial public meeting. It was time to review the official community plan. Dave Murray and I stood up at that meeting and said, Whistler shouldn't grow anymore. We have 45,000 beds approved, only 26,000 are built. 45,000 approved, this is 1989. We're only halfway built. What do we look like when the rest of those beds get built? And Dave and I said, that's a scary thought. We shouldn't be approving any more beds. Let's put a cap, let's put a moratorium on growth. Well, unfortunately, we hadn't evolved, the decision hadn't been made to move to a four-season resort, and the argument was made successfully that the resort should approve another 7,500 beds in order to become a year-round resort. That enabled us to build golf courses and tennis clubs and other amenities that turn, and that's been successful, by the way. So arguably, looking back, a good investment. 7,500 beds of development right has turned Whistler into a successful year-round resort. But we decided to cap growth. 1989, 52,500 beds was the limit. And we have not approved any new beds in Whistler since 1989, with the exception of the Four Seasons Resort. We did that, and that was one of the first things I did on council as environmentalist. It was a tough choice, but 500 beds we created, generated $8 million, which protected 40 acres of valley bottom wetland, which I thought was incredibly important, and I was willing to see a little bit more density added to the village. But that is the only case in Whistler's history since 1989 we've added more development rights. And yet you've seen all this tremendous development and growth. That's because it was pre-approved prior to 1989. In 96, I got elected. Hugh O'Reilly was elected mayor. We got a new administrator, and the new administrator was a very visionary man who understood strategic planning. And so we need to have a vision, we need to plan our future, redo the OCP. What are we going to do? What's Whistler going to do? It's 1996. We only have about 7,000 beds now left to build. How are we going to build a business model and transition from this period of growth to steady state economy? How do we do that? How do we redefine ourselves? We began to ask some questions. It wasn't an easy answer. Nobody had really quite done it before. One of the things that came up was we should have a long-term sustainability plan. All right, let's try that. Let's try establishing some core values and go to the community and see what they think. Partway through the process, the community adopted four goals and four objectives and core values. And one of them, to my great delight, because this was done by scientific polling and community input, stewardship of the natural environment, protection of the natural environment was one of our 5 core values. So we set about building an environmental strategy. A year and a half into that process, this was a big document. We were covering everything from A to Z. Halfway through that process, in about 1998, Dr. Karl-Heinrich Robert, the founder and creator of the Natural Step, was on a snowboarding vacation to Whistler with his sons, and a friend of Whistler and a friend who knew about Dr. Robert said, you should invite Dr. Robert to speak to your council and some of your business leaders. And that meeting occurred, and we were blown away. This is a man who should have won the Nobel Prize this year, in my humble opinion. I've heard him speak. He is just an incredible individual. So he talked to us and connected. Light bulbs went off for everybody. And we went, whoa, stop the presses, hold everything. We got to rejig this thing. We thought we were going on one path, but we're going to have to go on another because we've heard something really magical, special. And so we went out to the community to ask their permission to adopt a framework for sustainability called the Natural Step. And there began a new process of learning a new language for Whistler. And this is what I want to talk to you about. I think this is an opportunity for the Green Party to carve out a niche that could be the catalyst for meaningful change. In fact, I don't think it can happen without it. It is the single thing that has given me hope in the 20 years I've been trying to flog this dead horse. I now have hope because there's a framework that is so unassailable. It's based on science. Business gets it, and people get it. Problem is, it's not easy as tying your shoelaces. It takes a while. I'm going to share some of that language with you tonight. Please don't be concerned if you don't get it. It took me 4 times, and along the way, I remember our administrator coming to me and saying, "Ken, you're the green guy. What do you think about the Natural Step?" I said, "Jim, I'm not sure. I'm just afraid it's going to slow us down. I want to get on with stuff. I want to start doing things. I want to recycle more and ban this and ban that and change that. And I'm sure doing the Natural Step is going to slow us down a couple of years, isn't it?" And he said, "Well, I don't know, maybe." But then I said, "Okay, let's go ahead with it." But I was very impatient. Like, one of the things you learn in politics, in the mayor's chair, but in political organizing, is patience. Because without it, we're undone. Because we can't afford to give up. Like, the job is not over. So there we were. We went out. We asked the community what they thought, and we went through a community-based social marketing exercise, which is not a scary thing. It worked. Now we know that the community, the population is ready for these conversations. We were quite scared. We were, in fact, petrified and actually decapped by the business community, by the business sector. I would admit that they cost us an extra, I won't even say how much money, and several years, because they were afraid that sustainability was going to cost them money, because they didn't understand. They weren't listening. But when we finally got to the conversations, they got it. As Jim Harris has said, business understands that they need to have security for investment, minimize risk, and in the long term, things are going to get riskier if we don't start to move things. One of the fundamental parts of how that conversation started was the notion that we're all in this together. Jim said that. It's a collaborative approach to success. Worcester needed a new model for the future. And how are we going to do that if we didn't work together? Worcester's a small place, there's a lot of competition, and it couldn't be that the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Board and Worcester Blackcomb was working against the municipality. We couldn't have that. And we brought everybody together, and we all agreed that we were in this together. And then there was this global issue, this global call to action, which you all know about. I don't have to repeat about the ecological footprinting and the Millennium Ecosystems Assessment Report. We all, as human beings, have to accept responsibility for what's happening on the planet. We can't just blame business for it. We've seen the enemy, and he is us, because we're the ones that buy, we're the ones that support, we're the ones that elect. We're all in this together. Business people are us. They're human beings too. They are parents and fathers and mothers, sisters, brothers, grandmothers. Nobody gets a free ride. So this is one of the hardest things for North Americans. We're the most privileged society. It's going to be harder for us than the people in India and Sri Lanka who haven't yet realized our level of comfort. But as we begin to understand that the earth is finite, and we're going to have to find new ways of being, nobody gets a free ride. Everybody's in it together. And only by working together can we be successful. So the shared language, you know, the most fundamental thing I got was environment is not sustainability. Okay, first lesson. Environment is not sustainability, and both words scare the hell out of Joe Public. In my campaign, my campaign team said, do not use the word sustainability. I didn't use it once in 3 months. I could talk about economic, social, environmental justice. I can talk about meeting people's needs. There are many ways to talk about it until the people in the room get what you're talking about. So when you're going, I heard Bob Willard speak the other day in Oregon, and he's the author of Business Case for Sustainability. He says if you're going to talk to business, talk their language. Any group you go to, you need to learn their language to get them past the walls that they put up. And so we learned to speak new languages. Now I speak sustainability very comfortably, and I think I can use it in the next campaign. But when I go into a strange room, we have to be careful. But the James Hogan research, there's a great study that was done on Canadian attitudes towards communicating sustainability, showed that 67% of the population are the congregation that within 3 or 5 minutes of talking about sustainability get it. But not at the first. Do you know what sustainability is? No. 3 minutes later, they've got it. Something like 16% of the choir, we don't have to convert them or even talk to them, they get it. There's about 16% that are atheists and 2% that just aren't interested at all. And the good news about that study is we don't have to bother with those people at the bottom row. There is enough critical mass out there in our country that is receptive to these messages. We don't have to be afraid of them. We just have to be careful about how we message to bring them along. So the Green Party's opportunity is to learn this language, share this language, speak this language, because it is unassailable and it will act as a compass and an organizing point for all other conversations. So we don't have the luxury of time to be looking at solving one problem like climate change while creating other problems like nuclear waste. So the nuclear debate ends when you learn the scientific system principles of the natural step. We're focused on climate change. So what does Minister Lund do? He approves 3 nuclear power plants and the tar sands as a solution. You know, our children do not deserve that fate. Thanks. This is why we so desperately need the Green Party, and not just the Green Party, but a Green Party that can get to common consensus about what the shared language is. And that is what happened in Whistler. The natural step brings people together. It's unassailable. It's 18 years old. Scientists developed it. Scientists have been trying to knock it down, and they haven't been. And I can tell you, since Whistler adopted the natural step in 2002, we have worked with it and gotten better at it and more comfortable and more thankful that Dr. Robert brought that concept to us and we've been able to work for it. It's one of the reasons we won the International Award for the Best Sustainability Plan on the planet by the United Nations Environmental Program. We have won significant awards for the plan, and that doesn't mean anything. What means more is that it's working and other people are copying. So when Whistler was the first community in North America to adopt the natural step, now there are 6. And it's building and growing. What's really fascinating is the natural step started with the private sector, with corporate sector in Sweden. Big companies like IKEA, Electrolux, McDonald's Sweden adopted the natural step and then brought that over to North America. Nike adopted the natural step. Interface, it's so fascinating to listen to Jim. Interface Carpets, Ray Anderson, got his inspiration first from, I think it was Hawken. And after that, his 7 Summits of Sustainability is based on the framework of the natural step. Ray was just in Portland at the same conference I was speaking at and spoke to the Oregon Natural Step 10th anniversary. Ray Anderson came to Whistler and inspired our community. Ray Anderson speaks a language that business people get, and he understood this natural step framework. As did Walmart, went over to Sweden and met with Dr. Carl-Henrik Robert. He shared some of the principles in the framework. They're starting to get it, they're starting to incorporate it, but we're seeing the results on the ground. When a company like Walmart moves a centimeter, the rest of the world moves meters. So I'm gonna move into a little bit of what this language is based on. It's based on, it's a 5-step process, which is not new. There are lots of 5-step processes out there. But the first part is to understand that the earth is a system. Matter is not created or destroyed, it just keeps revolving around. We're in a closed loop. It's finite. There are resources in there which are finite. So we need to learn systems thinking. How many times have we come together, even amongst Greens? I've been in, I can't remember how many meetings now, untold meetings, where we get together with like-minded individuals and spend the afternoon debating about what actions to get to first, without stepping back a step and agreeing on what the systems are. Everybody wants to get to actions right away. Let's do something. I want to do something. Let's change light bulbs. I can tell you that all the light bulbs changed in Canada is not going to matter a damn if people keep flying. We need to learn to prioritize and get our minds around the scope and the magnitude of the issue. Yeah, changing light bulbs is good, but it's not good if we don't stop changing other habits. And so that's what I hear when I get into a room. All right, what are we going to do today? I want to do something that's making a difference today. But people need to be reminded, and we had to fight with our community. In fact, when we brought them together to sit down and plan our future, okay, everybody said, I want to ban plastic. You know, and actions started popping up from the floor. We said, just hang on a second. We need to back up and hold off on actions a little bit and start to learn a language together so that we can, when we do finally get to the actions phase, we have a compass and a guidebook that's going to take us along a path, a continuing path of success. So first is to learn systems. The second is to learn these 4 system conditions, these 4 principles. It's fascinating. Dr. Robert brought these scientists together and tried to, they said, well, we need to formulate some principles so that people can follow. What's the magic to become sustainable? They couldn't do it. They spent months. They couldn't come up with principles. So then they said, okay, we're not getting anywhere, let's flip it around. How can you destroy the planet? In very short order, they came up with 4 ways that will destroy the planet. So if you impact or take away people's ability to meet their personal needs, they don't give a damn about the environment. They'll cut down the last tree to cook that last dinner for their kids. They'll kill the last cow and take the last fish. People need to have their needs met. There needs to be social justice and social equality in the world, or we're not going to be sustainable. And then they did some work defining what those human needs are. There are 9 of them. They engaged a philosopher named Max Neef and defined the 9 basic human needs. Interestingly, wealth isn't one of them. And people have a sense that they need wealth, so we need to accommodate that to varying degrees. Those are conversations for the future that we're going to have to wrap our minds around.
Let's do it now. Let's get into it now.
And then the other conditions are we can't dig up the planet too fast. We can't poison it too quickly. We can't put in more contaminants than the earth can assimilate. And we can't degrade it by physical means faster than it can replenish itself. Seems pretty intuitive. So then they took those 4 ways you can wreck the planet, inverted the language and said, so in a sustainable society, people are not subject to conditions that undermine their ability to meet their basic human needs. Nature is not subject to systematically increasing concentrations of substances extracted from the Earth's crust, concentrations of substances produced by society, and it can't be systematically subject to increasing degradation by physical means. And the language is very interesting and intentional. It talks about a path. So sustainability is a journey. It's not a place that we know that we're going to arrive necessarily. But Dr. Robert, the scientist, said we need to take a systematic approach. And so, for instance, the first principle, concentrations of substances extracted from the Earth's crust, should not be extracted at greater volumes than the Earth can reassimilate them. Interesting. The way I understood that best is aluminum is one of the most prevalent metals on the planet. So that is not a mineral that can be extracted to overwhelm the Earth. So go ahead, mine aluminum. Cadmium, mercury, some of these rare minerals and elements, they can overwhelm the planet and be found and produced in quantities that nature cannot assimilate. And so we can't systematically increase those concentrations. Just to give you an example of how they've applied this science. And the science continues to get applied in more and more rigorous ways. 5 minutes. Okay. I've read you the natural step. Another part of the language is backcasting from principles. Simply put, it means choosing our future instead of being at the fate of somebody's prediction. So interestingly, when Whistler went through its sustainability plan, it chose a population of 14,000. The forecasts were, if we took off the cap, we would be 20 or 30,000 people. But the community said, no, we measured, we looked at what 14,000 would do. We chose that population. But backcasting from principles, so those sustainability principles, is you identify where you are today, you look to the future, a sustainable future, far enough out so that you can do that in the abstract, and then backcast. Look back to today and choose the actions that are going to move you in that direction. And part of the important language in the Whistler community is this moving towards our description, our shared description of success? So we brought everybody together and we said, define what success looks like in 60 years. And now we test every decision against that definition. So we know if we're moving in that direction or moving away. And we measure now to test. So in some short-term thinking and business as usual got us into the mess, and only developing new paradigms and new languages and thinking in long-term models will be able to solve the problem in the long term. I've spent too much time on the natural step and don't have much time for the games. The games is a whole long conversation. I think I touched on that this afternoon. A sustainable green games is something of an oxymoron. I think I went into that. We've got the games. We're going to make them as green, as sustainable as we can. In fact, we've insisted on that. That was our condition for participation. And this raises a point. If in your local communities and as leaders of the Green Party, you encourage local governments to sit down and write down what your principles and policies are, that comes back and pays spades. Because when you negotiate now, when you have developers or private sector or crown corporations come into your community and they ask you what your values are, you're not just making them up off the top of your head, or they're not hearing the mayor's version or the administrator's version. They're seeing a written down, something that is established and has validity and is substantiated by the process that went through to create those. It enabled us, one example is in BC Rail wanted a pesticide application. They wanted to spray triclopyr and a bunch of nasty chemicals on the track through Whistler. We had sat down and written out an environmental policy that said none of that. And when we showed it to them, they agreed to a pesticide management program that didn't include chemicals. The regional district outside of border didn't have that policy written down, and they were unable in their efforts to change BC Rail's policy. Because we had taken the time to write it down and state it, and now, even more powerfully, take it back to scientific-based principles, which are unassailable. We have a very powerful argument to whoever comes to do business in Whistler. I'll just finish on the Olympics by reading a quote. Whistler and Vancouver are the co-host cities. We just signed a memorandum of understanding And one of the items in that was, quote, to use the games to accelerate our collective journey towards environmental, social, and economic sustainability. That's in our signed document. VANOP knows that, the IOC knows that, and the world will know that in 2010. Moving to some of the observations about how to be successful in politics and what it might mean for the Green Party is to bring really clearly the grassroots and businesses together and to empower local governments. I said this afternoon, I've discovered that it's relatively futile to try and change the other orders of government. Success will come at the grassroots, at the community level. If the Green Party can help local governments empower their citizens and move sustainability agendas forward in local communities, the other orders of government will have no choice but to follow as laggards in our wake. An example, a concrete example that I'll share is there's a number of taxes that the province collects on all of our behalf.
True.
And they're not really good at sharing them. Some of you will know that the tax gap, something like, my numbers are going to be a little bit off. I think it's federal government collects about 50% of taxes, municipal, provincial government's about 35%, and what's left comes to municipalities. And we've seen massive downloading over the years. Actually, I think it might be smaller, 8% or something comes to municipalities. We are hard done by, and yet we're the people on the ground that get slammed when we can't provide services to the community. Worcester Council had one of the most challenging parts of the year when the provincial government cut healthcare funding. The local healthcare center came to council for $80,000 emergency funding so that they could continue to operate for the year. And council said, that's a provincial responsibility. We can't do that. If we begin to do that, it sends a message to the province that it's okay to start cutting those programs. As much as we would dearly love it, but we still could not go into the grocery store and walk on the street without hearing from people, how dare you not fund childcare. But it wasn't us that didn't fund childcare. It was first the federal government who downloaded it, and then the provincial government. So what we did was, with the hotel tax, is we argued that resort communities have an enormous challenge trying to fund the infrastructure necessary to service a world-class resort on the back of the taxpayer. Why can't the tourists pay some of that? Give us some help. It took us 2 years and, frankly, some blackmail. But we were victorious in the end. And the province agreed to, and they didn't do it just for Worcester, they did it for the province. All developing resort communities as part of their tourism growth strategy. And we won an extra share of the hotel tax. In real dollars, Worcester went from about $3 million a year to $12 million a year in revenues. And that is an example of how the provincial government can share revenues and empower local governments, giving them their own self-funded sources that are not based on the property tax to become successful. There's lots of other opportunities. The real estate transfer tax, the gas tax, we're starting to see, actually, that was a breakthrough that happened at the federal level, direct sharing to municipalities. So this is the wave of the future. Action happens at the municipal level, and they need to be empowered. So Green Party, get your minds around how to empower local governments as your role in the province. For the next leader, study from your mentors. There's a special skill set that's out there for political leaders. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of great leaders out there. Go visit them. They're happy to give their advice. Listen carefully. Be gracious and respectful. I think Jim mentioned that. We can't, one of the things I learned in counselor school was not to let it get personal. I don't tolerate personal attacks on my council table. We don't do that. It's not allowed. I cut off debate. And in fact, we spent so much time ramming that into the heads of councillors, I haven't had once to chastise them for it. But we spent hours training ourselves to be a good local government. And the first rule is nothing's personal. respectful. British Columbians want to be proud of their politicians and their leaders. They're having a hard time doing it. Let's give them an opportunity to do so. Be the change. I stole this from Deepak Chopra. But you know, we have to, you know, I agree. I think Al Gore doesn't come across terribly convincingly. He would have been much more powerful had he made some personal changes in his life. I think we can do that, and I think it behooves us to become role models for the people we are trying to impact. Not that I'm trying to brag, but in my 2 years as mayor, I've driven to work 6 times. My preference is to ride my bike. I love to mountain bike. Second choice, and this is one of the reasons I'm the luckiest mayor in Canada, I've got a cross-country ski trail that is about 150 meters from my door. I walk down the hill and I skate ski to work in the winter when I can't mountain bike.
Rough life, rough life.
Third choice is take the bus. Fourth choice, carpool. And I think it's making a difference in the community. You know, when the community sees me on the bus, they saw me on the Greyhound bus this morning, and yesterday when I went to the meeting in Pemberton. 5:30 a.m. from Whistler this morning. And I'll never do this again. I took the bus to Calgary for the FCM. 15 hours in the bus to try and reduce my carbon footprint, and it's not worth it. The other thing is to really state boldly your principles and values and stick to them. You know, I think one of the other reasons for my success in politics was, despite the fact that I was marginalized in the community and ridiculed, they respected the fact that I read the council packages, I spoke to them, I spoke true, and I never wavered. I never changed from my principles, and didn't cut corners and again, when you say not personal, you never make a decision based on a personal friendship. You make the decision in the abstract, as if the person who owned the business you don't know or is going to change tomorrow. And that way you can make a principled approach and not be tempted to make decisions to favor any one particular individual. But consistency and staying to principles and showing that what you value more are your principles over your personal advancement is something that resonates with the electorate. As I said before, the shared language of the natural step, I would not be mayor if it hadn't been for that sustainability plan. I could not have gone to the business community and convinced them that I could be a mayor that would protect their investment and their assets and would work with them to find collective and collaborative solutions. The plan stated it. I ran, my campaign was champion of the plan. All of the other 6 councillors in Whistler were elected on similar platforms. We all supported the community-based plan and our language, our shared language of success. And it acknowledges this nested hierarchy. The environment is what gives life to everything. The society exists within that, and the economy exists within that. I wish I had the slide. It's one of my favorite slides of 30 that I give in my PowerPoint. But it's a metaphor. We need to stop talking about triple bottom line and 3-legged stools. And Mike Harper wants to add culture. I respect Mike greatly, but we don't need to complicate the matter. Environment, society, economy, they're all in there. It's comprehensive, it's exhaustive, and it allows us, this language allows us to deal with the smallest decisions and the biggest decisions. Courage, boldness, conviction. I think one of your leaders mentioned that. People are looking for leaders. They're not looking for wimps. And this is one of my observations when I was leader of AWARE is in being radical or being uncompromising, I guess is a better way to say it, it created space for compromise. And I said earlier today, compromise is the art of politics. You never get everything you want. And I've learned this much more clearly as mayor. When I go to the province, if we want something, they want something. It's never all or nothing. There's always compromise. You have to get into it. And so if the Green Party, I think I read somewhere, and I hope I'm not, well, the votes have been cast. Moving to the center is not a strategy. That's a strategy for the Liberal government. or the Conservatives. The Green Party needs to stick to its position and advocate for an uncompromising adherence to principles and change. In the act of doing that, being as far out as you can, you create the space for compromise. If everybody's in the center, where's the compromise? Build support for local actions in the context of working for the greater good. This, I think it was Einstein, there's been a number of people. People's lives are richer for helping others. So let's not be doing this for ourselves. We're doing this for other people. We're doing it for the planet. We're doing it for the people who are infected with AIDS in Africa. We're doing it for our First Nations, Indigenous people around the world, not just in Canada. But let's live for a higher purpose than our own self-centered narcissism.
I heart Ken.
So my final words are: be the voice of science and spirit, and remain positive and hopeful. Stand on your principles, learn and share this new language of sustainability, and keep us moving towards or away from shared descriptions of success. Together we can define what success is, and remarkably, when you bring people in a room and you ask them to picture out 100 years, nobody wants polluted water, nobody wants bad air, nobody wants flooded Vancouver. Everybody wants the same things. And in 100 years, you can do that in the abstract of whatever political reality people can imagine today, whatever financial constraints might happen, but you picture it out. And this is some of the work that the International Center for Sustainable Cities is doing, is developing long-term plans. Calgary just did a 100-year plan. Vancouver's got one, but they didn't take enough time to engage the community to get buy-in. These long-term visions is a part of the language of success. And lastly, I just offer my support in any way I can to the party, to the leaders. If we can work together, I expect we will be working together because we're working for the same things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Worship. In the span of the last 25 minutes, you were able to quote Dr. Aubert, you talked about Hawken, you talked about Anderson. There are not a lot of mayors in BC who do that. Green's heart Ken Melamed. This is the kind of mayor that speaks to municipal empowerment that we have always talked about as a party, and you're the kind of mayor that we hope will continue to be re-elected. I know that Kate and I have always said if there is anything that we can do personally for a re-election campaign, it means picking up the phone, it means knocking door to door. All you have to do is ask, and we will be there in a heartbeat for you. You stood up for us at a time when we needed you at UBCM, you didn't hesitate to do it, and I'll never be ever tired of telling people that you did that, and this party will never grow tired of thanking you for that. The next leader of this party will ask for your counsel and your advice on how to continue that journey. In the movie The Shawshank Redemption, Morgan Freeman says, do you remember this part? He says, get busy living or get busy dying. And Ken Melamed chose to get busy living for Greens. He didn't want to wait. He didn't want to sit back and let everything else take its toll on him. You showed that what you did at a municipal level, the next leader that we elect tomorrow can do that on a provincial level. And I genuinely and honestly believe that your story inspires our leader to believe there is no question we can become an MLA, we can become leader of the opposition, and we will have a Green Premier in this province, 100%. And I thank you for inspiring all of us to believe that, genuinely. Thank you so much.
in Ontario, we just had 107 candidates run, and to recognize the incredible job each of them did, we created the Order of the Green Scarf. And for the first municipality in Canada to implement the natural step, and for what I think we all would agree, hearing Ken's personal journey tonight, we can safely argue the greenest mayor in Canada and perhaps North America. Ken, I'd like to invest you in the honorary Order of the Green Scarf.
Stand up for that. That's good. Yeah, absolutely. My granddaddy always loved two things. He loved chess and he loved boxing. And he always said growing up, you got to pay attention to the World Series of chess. You got to watch the smart guys. And in boxing, he only ever paid attention to the heavyweights. And for us to have you at UBCM and for what you did tonight, to have an Olympic mayor of green caliber, you're a heavyweight, and we're so honored to have you on our side. And one more time, a heavyweight, Ken Melamed. Thank you.